Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining for the session. Our talk is titled AI-Enabled Human Power Grabs and How to Stop Them. Our speaker today will be Tom Davidson. In this talk, Tom's going to discuss how AI could enable a tiny group of humans or just one human to take over a country and even the world. This risk is ballpark similar probability to AI takeover and would be similarly bad if it happened. But there's been significantly less effort to reduce it. This talk will aim to raise awareness and understanding of the risk and discuss some countermeasures. Tom Davidson is a Senior Research Analyst at the Forethought Center for AI Strategy. He's currently working on assessing whether AI could lead to significant and long-lasting concentrations of power. Last year, he spent 9 months at the UK AI Safety Institute as part of the autonomous systems teams. Previously, he's worked on AI timelines and AI takeoff speeds. As a reminder, if you have any questions for Tom, you can submit them via the Swapcard app. We'll then select a mixture of prepared and audience questions to ask the speakers. And there'll also be an office hours in Junior Ballroom 4 right after the session. As part of the Q&A portion, Lucas van Wieden will join Tom on stage. Lucas is a research fellow at Open Philanthropy who's been working on risks of concentration of power alongside Tom. But now I'd like you to join me in welcoming Tom to the stage.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm going to talk about the risk of AI-enabled human power grabs. I think the easiest way to introduce this risk for an audience like this is by analogy with a more familiar risk, the risk of AI takeover. So let's start by recapping a very basic version of that threat model. So first, humanity develops superhuman AI. Unfortunately, superhuman AI is misaligned and it seeks power. As a result, superhuman AI is ultimately able to seize power for itself and take over. The AI-enabled human power grab threat model is very closely analogous. So the first step is exactly the same. Humanity develops superhuman AI. In the second step, instead of superhuman AI being misaligned in power seeking, it's controlled by a power seeking actor. That is just one human or a very small group of humans who are seeking to use the AI to gain power for themselves. In the third step, again, superhuman AI is deployed and seizes power. But this time, it doesn't seize power for itself. It seizes power for the power-seeking actor, a group of humans. So as this analogy shows, on the face of it, this is a pretty similar risk in its structure to the risk of AI takeover. And so it shouldn't be surprising at first blush if it's a similarly important risk and similarly likely to happen. And that's actually what me and Lucas, who have been working on this risk for the past few months, do believe. Compared to AI takeover, though, this particular risk is much more neglected. There's maybe a handful of people, definitely single digits of people that are working on this risk compared to the tens or hundreds of people that work on the risk of AI takeover. And part of what I'm hoping to do here today is to raise awareness of this risk and encourage all of you to think about whether there's any way that you could change your careers or change the things that you're focusing on in order to tackle this risk. Before I dive into explaining the threat model in more detail, let's talk a bit about who could be in this power-seeking actor. I think the two main groups that are likely to be well positioned to pull off this kind of maneuver are senior lab employees, especially the top executives that might be able to get additional access to AI systems and might be able to kind of remove guardrails and controls using their political power within the organization. People on the security team who would have access to those safeguards on the AI system, and people on the post-training team who ultimately are particularly involved in shaping the exact personality and goals that the AI has. Also, senior people in the US government, I think are more likely to be involved. I'm mostly on this talk going to consider the risk for the case of the United States, although I think similar threat models apply elsewhere. The United States is a particularly important country to be focused on. And I think, the most senior politicians in the executive and Congress and the most senior members of the military are the most likely to be involved. But now let's go back to the basic threat model. And the way this talk is going to be structured is I'm going to go through the second and third parts of this threat model one by one. I think you're probably all familiar with the arguments for why we might develop superhuman AI in the next few years. So I'm going to focus on second and third parts. The second part is very much unique to this threat model. because it's about how a small group of people could potentially get exclusive control over superhuman AI. The third part actually overlaps with threat models for AI takeover very closely, but my own opinion is that there's been nowhere near enough work on actually concrete threat models for AI takeover, so I'm going to spend a fair bit of time discussing that as well. Okay, how could a tiny group of humans gain an extreme degree of control over superhuman AI? So first thing to notice is that already development of frontier AI systems is fairly concentrated. You have to have a huge amount of resources to actually develop a frontier system. It costs tens of millions of dollars, and those costs are expected to rise very rapidly over the coming years. As we've seen kind of OpenAI building out hundreds of billions of dollars worth of data centers over the rest of this decade. And I think that that gets into this first point about why the number of projects that are on the frontier for AI might fall over time. So economies of scale, the cost of serving an AI is very small compared to the cost of developing it in the first place. And even if we're talking about techniques that use inference scaling, like O1, if you have more compute for development, you can typically train more powerful inference and then distill that to a cheaper cost. So even for when inference is important, if you can afford to just spend loads and loads of money on developing your models in the first place, it's likely you'll be able to outcompete others in terms of delivering that model at low cost. And that's the kind of economic environment that can easily lead to the numbers of different participants in the market falling over time, as there's one person that just spends the largest amount on development in the first place and can then serve its products as cheaply as possible. And so economies of scale could push there to be fewer projects over time. I don't think that's going to push all the way to there being just one project developing superhuman AI, but I think it could push in that direction. National security concerns could push us all the way down to just one project. So already there have been people calling for the centralization of Western AI development, Manhattan Project for AI, based on national security concerns that another country will steal the weights, or on safety concerns that if AI is widely accessible, it could be very dangerous. So that could lead to political efforts to centralize AI projects in just one developer. So there's now only one project that's developing AI. Next, rapid recursive improvement. So even if there's multiple projects that are fairly close to the frontier, maybe there's a gap of 4 months or so. If there's one project which is 4 months earlier in automating AI R&D entirely, then their pace of progress may become dramatically faster. And then it could be that 4 months later, they've developed very, very significantly superhuman systems. And the laggard that used to be just 4 months behind and used to be just a small capabilities gap behind is now very far behind in terms of their capabilities. So even though it kind of looks coming up to the point as if there's going to be many different companies developing frontier AI systems and they're all close to each other, we actually find that, again, there's just one company that's the first one developing really superhuman systems. And if a company finds itself temporarily in that place where it's suddenly got a big lead and it's got really superhuman AI, there might be options by which they could sabotage lagging projects, maybe cyber attacks, maybe kind of lobbying for political influence to get them, say, shut down based on safety concerns. So that's all to say that we could easily be in a world, not definitely, but there is a good chance we're in a world where there's just one organization that is developing superhuman AI, a completely general purpose and hugely powerful technology. Now, on its own, that's worrying because that organization may seek to gain power over the rest of the country and the rest of the world. But I think even more worrying is the risk that within that organization, power could be significantly concentrated. So today, in frontier AI developers, power is actually fairly distributed because there are hundreds of different people that are needed to do the technical work to develop and deploy AI systems. That distribution of work naturally distributes control over how AI is deployed and developed. However, again, once we get to the stage when AI systems can fully replace human workers, it will be possible to restructure the way that the AI company is run. And in principle, you could just have a tiny number of executives at the top or just one executive at the top, directing the way in which the next AI is developed, and all of the actual work being done by AI systems that is obedient to that one person at the very top. All the human employees could be fired, or they could be put off to the side working on product engineering tasks, while there's maybe just one person that's really deciding how the next generation of superhuman AIs are going to be developed, and they have kind of unbridled control over that process. So that's all to say that there could be a world, it looks like it could easily be technologically feasible for us to be in a world where there's one organization which is far ahead of the others in developing really superhuman systems. And that company could be structured so that there's just one person right at the top who's directing an army of obedient AI workers into shape exactly how the AI system is developed and deployed. I'm going to talk now in a little bit more detail about the types of excessive control that tiny number of people at the top could get, and how they could get it. So on the right-hand side, you can see I've distinguished between two types of what I'm calling excessive control over superhuman AI. So the first is the more intuitive one, privileged access to capabilities. This would mean that if there's a tiny clique of senior lab executives and/or politicians that are able to use the most powerful AI systems without any safety guardrails, they could, for example, ask a million copies of GPT-7 to think about, to brainstorm all the ways that they could do a coup over the United States. And there would be an absolutely unprecedented amount of cognitive labor going towards figuring that out. That's not something that any political system has been subject to before, and we don't have any particular reason to think that it would be robust to that. That's privileged access to capabilities. The one below, I think, is actually more worrying still, which is AI behavior favoring the power-seeking actor. That is to say, it will be very, very economically, militarily advantageous to deploy AI systems across the whole economy soon after they're developed. Companies that do that will have big advantages over companies that don't. Politicians that rely on AI advice for their political maneuverings may have big advantages over those who don't. And certainly militaries that deploy AI will have very big advantages over those that don't. So we'll see, I expect, shortly after superhuman AI is developed, it being deployed widely over the economy in many important areas. It may be possible to design those AI systems in a way that though perhaps it's claimed that they're going to follow the law and they're going to follow the kind of interests of all of society, in fact, they are favoring the interests of just a tiny group, perhaps the tiny group that had excessive control over how they developed in the first place. And so we could end up with a world where there are these, hundreds of millions of AI systems deployed all over the economy in all these important systems, looking for opportunities to further the interests of a tiny group that has programmed them to do exactly that. So I'm going to kind of go now through three routes to these two types of excessive control. Privileged access to models and compute. So that's, perhaps lab executives being able to access models that others can't and having access to more computational resources with which to run them, which inference scaling is beginning to show can really increase the level of capability you can reach. A bad model specification. That is, the model specification is a language description of how models are meant to behave. It says the things that they should do and the things that they shouldn't do. And at the moment, AI companies just write them and they can essentially put whatever they want into their model specifications. In fact, the model specifications we see today are mostly pretty good, but as AI systems become very powerful, it will become much more tempting to make model specifications that favor the company that's made them or favor the interests of a particular people. And so it may become increasingly tempting for people to tweak the model specs in ways that help them. So maybe you tweak the model spec so that actually when you're using the system, it's going to use its capabilities and not refuse the requests you make compared to when other people use them. That would lead to privileged access because you're able to get it to do some kind of malicious planning for you, whereas other people using the same system can't. Or maybe a system that's deployed widely is always kind of being told in its model specification to promote the interests of the company that made it. So that would be AI behavior favoring the power-seeking actor. The third way on the bottom left here is, again, one of the most scary ways, AI subversion. That is, even if the model specification says that the AI is going to be promoting good values, and there's no way in which that model specification favors one group over another, it could be that when the AI is actually being developed, there are people that the AI company or people within the AI company subvert the development process so that the values that the AI actually pursues are different to those in the model specification, but that's not obvious to people. I'm going to talk through these three things now in a little bit more detail and how they could happen. So privileged access to models and compute. So currently, AI models are made public a few months after they're developed. And there's not a massive gap between the best models that are available internally to AI companies and the models that are available publicly. However, as I've already referenced a few times, we may find AI progress becoming much faster after AI R&D is automated. And that can mean that a gap of, say, 4 months between developing a system and deploying it publicly could result in a very massive capabilities gap between the systems that lab employees have access to and systems that the rest of the world has access to. And for certain capabilities like cyber and R&D, the lab may just decide, or the AI developer, AI project may decide to never release them, especially if the government is involved in AI development. The government may just say, this is too dangerous, we're restricting this. In which case, there are these really powerful capabilities which are permanently just available to the project that develops superhuman AI. So that's to say that people who are involved in an AI project are very likely going to have access to much more powerful capabilities than people who are not. Again, there's a different question about whether a small group within an AGI project would be able to get access to more powerful capabilities. And here I think it's much less clear, but there are routes by which, if a senior person involved in a project wanted to get access to more compute or a more powerful model, they could do so. They have a lot of political power. They could ask the security team to give them permissions. They could say that there's a kind of important project they want to do and they don't want to be monitored for various sensitivity reasons. And as I've discussed, once human employees are automated, they will naturally be possible to concentrate power much more in the hands of a small number of people. Okay, that's the first reason we could get excessive control over AI. I've already talked briefly about the bad model specification. Here I'm going to go through a few examples. So let's say that you've got AI systems deployed controlling military systems. Currently today, autonomous military systems obey the rule of law. Autonomous military systems obey the instructions of their human commanders, and the humans that command them are kind of in charge of making sure that they don't follow any illegal that they behave legally. So if that kind of background use case persists, then we could see even highly autonomous military robots in kind of following instructions of particular people, and potentially even if they're instructed to do something that's illegal. A more mundane example, but I think very important, would be AI systems deployed internally. If the model specification for that AI system tells them that they should just follow instructions, unless the instructions are legal, then that would allow someone at the organization to instruct them, make another AI system that's secretly loyal to me. And because that's not actually an illegal instruction, the AI would actually then follow that instruction and make that secretly loyal system. And so this, unless there's much more scrutiny over the model specification, it seems like there is some risk that the model specification could end up giving a power-seeking actor kind of undue influence over AI systems. Lastly, AI subversion. So this is tampering with the development process or substituting in a different model after training. So in the first case, one example would be that at the end of the training process, there's a secret additional fine-tuning process where you fine-tune the model to be secretly loyal to just you personally or small groups rather than the values that it was previously trained with. Another kind of more mundane possibility is that after a system's been widely deployed, you actually kind of, without anyone noticing, you substitute in a different system, which was trained via a different method, but without anyone realizing it. And now you've got a widely deployed system that isn't behaving as it is meant to be according to the model specification. There's various different types of AI subversion, i.e. ways that you could have the AI behavior differ from what's model specification. But the most important is secret loyalties. That is an AI system that is kind of constantly pretending to be aligned to its model specification, pretending to follow the law, pretending to put kind of the interests of all society first, but actually secretly is loyal to just one person. Okay, so I've just gone through, in a fair bit of detail, different ways in which superhuman AI could be controlled by a tiny group of individuals and different routes by which that could happen. The second part, the third part of this three-stage argument is on how once a small group has got excessive control over superhuman AI, how they could actually use it to seize power. Okay, so Lucas and I have identified three broad routes that you could use superhuman AI to seize power. The thing that we focused on to try and be as concrete as possible is getting absolute control over the military forces of a country. So that's our kind of endpoint, is that this tiny group of people now has absolute control over the military forces. They can tell the military forces to do anything and they will comply. So today, the president is normally the commander-in-chief of the United States Army, but he doesn't have absolute control over the military. If he gives certain types of orders, the military will refuse. The military is meant to refuse illegal orders, and in practice, indeed, the military does often refuse to execute the will of the president. But here we're talking about a more unbridled level of control. So the first way is that you could use AI systems to just build the military systems yourself. Now you control them, you've just built them, they'll do whatever you want, and now that gives you absolute control over those military systems. If they can overpower the other military force in the country, then you'll have complete control. The next option is that you don't necessarily build them all yourselves, but you tamper with military systems controlled by other people, so you can either seize control over them or disable them, and then you end up controlling those military systems yourself after you've tampered with them. And the third way is that you gain political influence over others, so that as a result of your political influence, military systems are designed to be controlled by you in particular, rather than by others. Let's go through them one by one. So first, building your own military power. So historically, it has never been possible for a small group to build enough military power in a short amount of time to overthrow a country's existing military force. But there is a chance that superhuman AI will be different. So in particular, once we develop superhuman AI, it will be possible, by running large numbers of those AIs, doing military R&D, to do orders of magnitude more cognitive work on designing military systems than the whole world does today. So you could be running, a million top human scientists and engineers thinking 100 times faster than a human. So that in every day you're doing, maybe a year's worth of cognitive labor, kind of iterating on your experimental designs and thinking through how you could build military systems. It's hard to know whether there'll be, significant experimental bottlenecks to develop a new technology. So we don't know whether this is what kind of military technology this would produce, but it at least seems conceivable and worrying, the possibility that you could very quickly design very powerful technology. In addition to that, if you do come up with designs for very powerful military systems, it would be possible to build them without having any humans involved in the project. So today, if you wanted to try and secretly build powerful military systems, you need to employ humans in the organizations and the factories that are doing that work. But again, once we've got superhuman AI, they could autonomously do the work that's needed to build those military systems. And so it'd be much easier to keep such a project secret. Still, not necessarily doable to keep it secret, given that there may be active monitoring from the government, and they may be able to detect the signs of it. But compared to today, there would be many more avenues for doing it secretly. And so it seems like a risk that becomes of outsized importance once we have superhuman AI. That's the secret project scenario for building military power. Another scenario we think is plausible is industrial dominance. So in this one, rather than doing a secret project, you actually build out large industrial infrastructure out in the open. So that the first step there is that you're using your superhuman AI to make very large revenue. So currently, cognitive labor throughout the world earns about $50 trillion a year in income. And in the limit, you would expect superhuman AI cognitive labor that ultimately can replace all human labor to earn, again, tens of trillions of dollars a year. Now, of course, it won't be that high at first. There'll be very large deployment lags to actually deploying superhuman AI across the economy, but still, you'd expect superhuman AI to very quickly be able to make very large amounts of money, maybe hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars of revenues plus massive investments. So that could allow an organization to kind of invest lots of money in building out new industries, new kind of hardware industries, new factories, new robotics industries. And in addition, they're going to have privileged access to superhuman AI labor to design these, possibly very advanced new industrial technologies. And what that could mean is that though you're not building actually military power. You're building kind of more and more hard industrial power that increasingly you could quickly use to build military power at a later time. So this second route is more likely if a lab, if the power-seeking actor doesn't want to do anything as egregious as actually building military technology directly, but wants to kind of generically build up its own economic industrial strength, and then is ultimately, it increasingly becomes clear that they could in fact gain military dominance if they wanted to redirect an industrial base towards a military purpose. So that's building military power. The next route to seizing power is tampering with military power. So let's say we've avoided that first route. We've avoided just one company owning all of the industry, and we've avoided one company kind of building a military in secret. Instead, we've perhaps used their AIs to design AI systems that are being integrated into the military and that are formally reporting to the military. And so it seems like we've now kind of dealt with the problem, and we're automating the military using systems that the superhuman AI is designing, but that those systems are formally reporting to other people and are formally controlled by other people. Even in this world, there's the risk of tampering. So there's three types of tampering worth being aware of here. So if you're controlling the organization that's developed superhuman AI, and then your superhuman AI is designing military systems, you could instruct that superhuman AI to design the military systems in ways such that those systems are subverted. So in particular, let's say that the superhuman AI is secretly loyal to you in particular. You can instruct them to make military systems controlled by AIs which are also secretly loyal to you in particular. So now the AIs that end up controlling the military systems that are widely deployed, though they appear to pass the safety tests, they appear to be kind of loyal to the Constitution. In fact, you've built them in such a way that they're still secretly loyal to just you. And so the fact that you were involved in the building of those systems has kind of allowed you to subvert them. Another fairly similar threat model is that you insert a cyber vulnerability in the construction of those systems that allow you to later hack and seize control or disable that system. And a final possibility is that you don't actually do any tampering when you're building the systems. Maybe the AI systems, the military systems, are built by other actors. But what you do is you conceal the extent of the cyber capabilities of your superhuman AI. So the rest of the world thinks that your cyber capabilities are here, but actually you deceive them, and you've got much greater cyber capabilities than they've realized. Then if you're very far ahead in terms of your cyber, then it might be possible to simultaneously hack a wide range of military systems and either disable them or seize kind of active control over what they're being used for. And that applies not just to direct military systems, but also to general purpose robots and kind of industry manufacturing capabilities more generally. You could hack to seize control or disable them as part of attempt to do a kind of a coup that seizes power. Okay, so we've gone through the first two types: building military systems, tampering with military systems. The third route is political. In the third route, you're not using any kind of technological shenanigans to get to power. You're using your existing political influence and using AI to increase that influence more. So the thing you're really aiming for here is for the model specification, which again describes how AI systems are meant to be behaving. You want that model specification to state quite plainly that the AI system should follow your instructions over anyone else's, and you want to avoid that model specification limiting your control. So you want to avoid it saying stuff like, don't follow your instructions when those instructions are illegal. Don't follow those instructions if the instructions are part of an attempt to do a coup. And at first blush, it seems like, of course, we're going to make sure the model specification doesn't allow anyone to do to instruct military systems or other systems to help them do a coup. But I think there are routes by which this could happen. So to begin with, the power-seeking actor, as I already alluded to, may already have significant control over the project that's developing the superhuman AI in the first place, and therefore the project that's choosing what the model specification says. They might already have significant control over the executive branch and over the military. And so if these people were colluding and were kind of putting pressure on the system and pushing for a particular model specification, if they were able to lean on ambiguities about how it would be interpreted so that it's not completely clear-cut, that it would allow a senior person to do a military coup and the systems would obey, but there's some ambiguity there, then they may be able to push it through. I mean, especially if there's already been, and the process, which, to be honest, has already been starting, of kind of eroding the checks and balances on political power. This could be a kind of culmination or kind of a final step to which this process is heading towards. In addition, I think that when we develop superhuman AI, there's going to be a general state of turmoil. There might be kind of racing between the US and China to quickly develop and deploy AI systems. There might be kind of widespread kind of dissatisfaction with the political system because of perhaps widespread job loss, perhaps because democracy doesn't seem to be as competitive once we have AI systems and things are changing so much. And I think that could, a power-seeking actor with people high up in AI labs and in the government could capitalize on that general turmoil to just push through a model specification, which does in fact give them effective control over the military and allow them to do a coup. In addition, this power-seeking actor could have very large degree of control over AI capabilities, as discussed, and massive amounts of money, and they could use that for all kinds of kind of political advocacy. So they could have, very persuasive media influence. They could have kind of their AI systems advising other people in government and advising the general public about the level of risk, and their AI systems could be biased. So if you become, as I have, increasingly reliant on Claude and GPT-4 for answering questions and queries, imagine in a world where now these AI assistants are superhuman and are much more capable than any other source of information. If a lot of people are relying on those systems, but actually they're controlled by a power-seeking actor, then again that could kind of bias the information flow and the source of information around high-stakes decisions like whether it's safe to deploy to the military, in a way that allows that deployment to go ahead despite the risks and despite the problems with the model specification. Okay, so I've talked about ways in which a tiny group of people could get excessive control over AI. And I've talked about ways in which they could use that control over superhuman AI to seize power over a country like the United States. As I've said, I think this is a risk that is comparable in size to AI takeover risk. So what can we do about it? I'm going to go through 3 buckets of interventions. Governance interventions, which are cross-cutting across the different routes to seizing power that we discussed. Some technical mitigations, which are also cross-cutting. And I'm going to go through one domain-specific mitigations, just as an example. Okay, let's start with governance. The most important thing for governance, I think, is transparency. That is, at the moment, the rest of the world doesn't really realize how powerful AI is going to be and how concentrated it's going to be in power, in terms of the risk that a very small number of people could control the technology. I think that if we are able to keep key actors in the rest of the world, ideally the public, but certainly Congress and the judiciary and other checks and balances in power, kind of keep them kind of informed about the development of AI, then that makes it likely that they will act to prevent massive concentration of power before that power is cemented. One way to think about this is that today power is fairly widely distributed, and the people amongst which it is distributed have an interest in preventing massive power concentration. So if we can keep them aware of the facts of the ground, then they will kind of leverage their own influence to try and limit the degree of concentration of power. So the first type of information to share is information about the extent of AI capabilities. In particular, AI capabilities at political strategy, persuasion, military R&D, and cyber capabilities. Next, who has access to those capabilities? Again, the world I'm worried about is a world in which just a tiny number of people have access to superhuman AI capabilities in critical domains. If we're constantly sharing information about what the capabilities are and who can use them, then the world will notice, oh, we're in this crazy situation where just 5 people have access to these powerful capabilities. Let's rectify it. And additionally, we should be kind of monitoring and sharing information about how the capabilities are used. If there is a super persuasion capability we should be saying if that capability is being used, then the person using it should say, what am I using it for? What's my purpose? And then that their use of that capability should be monitored and logged, so it can be compared with the purpose that they said that they were using the capability for. So if they say that they're using persuasion capabilities for just research and experimentation, but then you actually find that they're trying to plan how to kind of persuade Congress to go to kind of support a kind of very radical change in AI governance legislation, then that can raise alarm bells. Thirdly, the model specification. So this is something I've talked about a lot. This is the Word document that describes how an AI system is meant to behave. It's just going to be an absolutely critical input into how the world evolves in the future, this model specification, because it's going to be describing how AI systems that are deployed across the economy behave, what kind of values they prioritize, what their goals are, whether they will break the law, whether they would help people seize power. If we can make that model specification public, including the model specification for models that are used to control military systems, including the model specification for models that are used to design new technologies, and the models that are used within AI labs to help them develop the next generation of AIs, then we can guard against the possibility that those AI systems, those critical AI systems, would help a small group seize power. In addition, sharing information about risks and how they're being assessed, what the safeguards are, and any incidents that occur, I think will be helpful. There's various routes, various mechanisms for information sharing and transparency. The most basic is just to publish or share information with trusted actors. There's whistleblowing protections for people, especially I think people who are part of AI development projects, be they private companies or centralized government projects. There's, of course, external audits. And I think particularly powerful is being able to have people and regulators or auditors that have employee level access to AI companies, and therefore can really verify claims around who's using the capabilities and for what, and what the distribution of power is within those companies. Next, distributed control. I'm going to move quite quickly through this because we are a little bit short on time. Essentially, we want to avoid the situation I described earlier, where there's just one tiny number of people right at the top of the organization that controls how AI systems are developed and used. That means keeping many different employees looped into the process. It means getting external actors like Congress involved. And it means also sharing access to AI systems widely across society, so that rather than some people having access to really good capabilities and other people having access to nothing, there's much more of an equal level of access to even up the playing field. Lastly, various technical mitigations. I've talked about the model specification. You can have AI systems within AI companies or people outside it, really red team that model spec by kind of automatically getting AI systems to generate cases in which the model spec could fail, and finding ways to improve the model spec. Very simple guardrails against misuse. So when AI systems are being deployed, even when they're being internally deployed, there should be guardrails against those systems being misused. You should not be allowed, if you're an employee of an AI developer, to use the system to help you tamper with the development of the next system. You shouldn't be able to use it to help you make an AI of the future be secretly loyal to just you. And the third cluster is information security for insider threats. So there's a lot of talk in our community about preventing an external actor from exfiltrating the weights. But from this threat model's perspective, a very big risk is that an internal actor, an inside actor, affects the model weights, not by stealing them and exfiltrating them, but just by doing a malicious fine-tune that changes the behavior of the AI model in an unintended way. And that's got different priorities for information security. Okay, I think let's move on to questions now, because we've got 14 minutes left. I want to give you all a chance to ask questions. Thank you very much.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Tom. And thanks, Lucas, for joining us on stage. So yeah, we're now going to go through a few questions. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we'll take some prepared questions and some audience questions as well. And as a reminder to everyone, you can still submit questions and vote on questions in Swapcard, but we have a few there already. So yeah, obviously, this is a terrifying risk. So maybe kind of the first question that comes up is, like, how psychologically realistic do you think it is that something like this happens, or somebody actually seeks power in this way?
I don't think that I don't believe that there are people who are currently planning to seek power in this way and that are thinking, okay, I need to, control superhuman AI entirely, and then I'm going to use it to seize power. But I do believe that humans have a strong tendency to want to increase their own degree of power and control on the current margin. People want to achieve more. They want more status. They want more power. So the way I think about it is that I'd be worried about people in powerful positions always looking to double their power, double again their degree of power. That means remove that red tape on how AI systems are developed. Remove those annoying guardrails that mean that I'm not allowed to use the AI systems that my company developed to help me brainstorm questions because it's now refusing my request. That's so annoying. Let's remove those internal guardrails. I want more compute to run that with so that I can get higher quality answers. I don't want everyone else to know what I'm asking the AI system. That kind of makes me feel uncomfortable. So again, on the margin, you're always reducing the oversight over what you're allowed to do. And then you just follow that trail of breadcrumbs and you end up just having, pretty much unbridled control over the way AI is developed, especially once you can fire or move away all the employees that you currently need to help and replace them with AI systems. And then maybe later in the process, you're worried about a government that you don't trust getting involved and misusing your AI systems in awful ways. And so you do now start to put some kind of secret technical measures that will mean that actually the AI systems won't follow the government's instructions once they've, if they do take control and kind of leave you with that control. And then, that slippery slope, I think, can lead all the way to a full-on power grab.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that. I would also add that the fact that most people wouldn't be planning for this today is a reason for optimism, why it's doable to have a coalition against this and implement interventions against this, because people will want to avoid it. And the other thing is that a particular reason for concern that it could happen later is if we have these AI systems with unusually strong strategic capabilities and an ability where you can ask the AI systems for advice on what to do according to your own interests. And there's this pretty strange situation where people might be asking AI systems for advice on what to do and some creative brainstorming for what they might be able to do and be happy that they did later on or stuff like that. And if those AI systems start suggesting these sorts of power grab plans, that's an odd situation where I can imagine people taking an opportunity that they wouldn't have done otherwise.
And am I right? The key thing that would be different is that normally, if you're considering seizing power, you might think that your plan has a good chance of failure, but potentially with superhuman AI strategic advice, it would be able to be yeah, this plan is basically guaranteed to work, and so that the kind of risk element would be removed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So maybe, staying on kind of this threat model. So maybe in comparison to kind of the classic AI takeover threat model, in which we kind of have this rogue superintelligence. We have a question from the audience, which is, how likely do you think it is that any superintelligent AI system could actually be loyal to a particular human?
Want to take that?
Yeah, I guess I'm basically sympathetic to the old orthogonality thesis of it would be possible to construct systems like this. So I think it's basically a question of whether someone would have the opportunity to make the systems loyal in this way.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if alignment is really, really difficult, then the AI system won't actually be aligned to that one person. So there's two scenarios. One scenario is where we can solve alignment, and then the AI is actually just aligned to this one particular person because, like Lucas says, that's just a type of alignment that makes sense. It's actually a relatively simple one. The other is where you can't solve alignment, and therefore the AI is maybe just pretending to be aligned to this one person. This person does a power grab, and maybe later on in the process, the AI actually seizes power for itself. But I mean, either way, I think this should be a big part of the problem.
Yeah, I agree with that there's that alignment problem, but it's plausible that's solved. I have wide error bars on how difficult that is.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Another question we have, given recent developments like DeepSeek, how much do you think this sort of thing undermines the claim that one lab can get such a big lead?
I think it was, for me, an update against one lab getting a really big lead. It's an example showing that actually, in terms of the quality of their engineering and algorithms, there's a Chinese organization which is like pretty close to the top Western organizations. Still, though, I personally expect that to develop superhuman AI, we're going to need to massively increase the compute inputs to development, and that will mean that many companies that have recently been able to catch up to the frontier, because the amount of compute has not recently been increasing very much, many of those companies will start falling behind again if indeed the compute requirements go up by 2 or 3 orders of magnitude. And I think the Chinese export controls are a reason to think Chinese companies in particular will struggle with that.
Yeah, I agree with the directional update, and that also in addition to the increasing amounts of compute, just the dynamic where the AIs themselves contribute to AI R&D, and this especially boosts the leading companies, is just something that's yet to happen, and it's like one of the main reasons I worry about this very extreme concentration of AI capabilities.
Sure. Yeah. Another question from Swapcard. Trevor says, it seems like many commonly proposed safety interventions could make power grabs, the risk of power grabs, worse. For example, things that limit the proliferation of dangerous capabilities would also limit the spread of defensive capabilities. Should safety advocates drop certain policy suggestions? And if so, which suggestions might seem worse on your model?
I think there's some tensions and some synergies. I would guess that like the place with the greatest tensions, I would guess, is the tension between like multiple actors developing AI capabilities versus that being centralized in one place, and the tension between race dynamics versus multiple people being able to use capabilities. So like the degree of is it good to centralize development in one project versus like have multiple competing projects? I would guess that's the greatest tension, and it is like a reason why it is better to have multiple competing projects. I would say that for safeguards against dangerous misuse, that seems like a less strong tension to me, though I can see something there.
Yeah, I agree with Lucas in terms of the number of AI developers. I think my own kind of current view is that the best number of projects developing AGI is 2, because if you have just 2 projects, then there's not too much racing, compared with like 10. But if there's 2 entirely independent developers, they can have genuinely independent superhuman AIs that can kind of audit each other. If you just have one developer that develops superhuman AI, and that AI is at some point kind of poisoned to be secret loyal to one person, there's no other superintelligences that can double check. You get a real gain from just having a second organization that's entirely independent that they can then check each other. I don't think you get similarly large gains from going to 3, 4, 5, 6 kind of competing AGI projects. So for me, I think there's like a sweet spot where you've got maybe 2, possibly 3 different AGI projects. I think in terms of restricting dangerous capabilities, in the case of bio, I think it's just good to restrict, offensive bio capabilities. That's not going to kind of concentrate power in a problematic way. For cyber, there is a very very fine line between use and misuse. And so I think in that case, there is a pretty good argument for distributing powerful cyber capabilities broadly. So if previously you thought, let's restrict cyber, really worried about cyber, I actually disagree. I think we should be sharing cyber capabilities broadly. And similarly for kind of strategic capabilities, like political strategy, persuasion, again, if your previous view is we need to lock that stuff down, then I would disagree. I'd say let's find any ways we can to safely spread that as widely as possible. I think on a case-by-case basis with each capability, we'll need to look at exactly who can we share it with so that it's safe, but it empowers defenses. And often there's a kind of best of both worlds where you can share it with thousands of different people across dozens of different organizations, but not make it fully public, such that, for example, Russia and China and other malicious actors might be worried about get full access to the capabilities.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe one final question to close up with. For anyone in this room who agrees with you that this risk is both neglected and very important, what do you think are the most important or valuable next steps that people can do to make progress on this?
My own view is that the top thing is transparency for frontier AI developers, all the things I talked about, especially who has access to the capabilities and how they're being used, and the model specification. Beyond that, I think that frontier AI companies currently do not have effective controls over how their internally deployed AI systems are being used. I think if you're an insider, an employee of that organization, it's not too hard to get unmonitored access to an AI system that is helpful only. I will help you with anything you want. And that's quite a scary situation. So I think getting those guardrails put in place for internal deployments and also getting the internal information security sorted out at frontier AI developers would be my third one.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I don't know how much to add.
Cool. Yeah. Well, great. I think that's about all we have time for. So thank you so much both for joining us and speaking about this issue. If you would like to continue the conversation with Tom and Lucas, you can join them upstairs in Junior Ballroom 4 for office hours, where you'll be able to ask them more questions about their work. So yeah, everyone, thank you so much.
Thanks.